Well, it is our pleasure today to welcome everyone here to a special event in celebration of Black History Month. It is our honor and pleasure to have with us Bev Anderson, who is the president of the Global Consumer Solutions business at Equifax. She's also a member of the board of directors at Expedia Group. Bev comes to us with a number of years of experience, deep and rich experience in the financial services industry. She's had positions as executive vice president and VP, also at big name firms such as American Express and Wells Fargo. And if that is not enough to impress you about Bev, she's also been recognized as one of the most powerful women in corporate America by Black Enterprise Magazine. So Bev, welcome.
Thank you so much, Phil. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
All right, so what we agreed on is breaking this conversation up into 4 parts. Our first part is just trying to get an understanding and get a sense for what it's like to be the president of an organization. Right. So I know maybe some of my senior students are in the audience today, and in class, I tell them, hey, we're going to role play as a senior executive. We have some of our graduate students in the audience, and they're about to hit the job market, and they're, at least from the side of the faculty, we're not just preparing people to just go get jobs. We are preparing them to go out and to be leaders in their fields. So if you could just give us a sense, what does your role as president entail?
Wonderful. Well, some days it feels like it's herding cats, but beyond that, let me tell you a little bit about my role. So I joined Equifax about a year ago from Wells Fargo, and I'm happy to talk about transitions and things like that. I lead the Global Consumer Solutions business. So this is our business that serves consumers directly. And if you think about the credit bureaus like Equifax, we typically serve other companies. So we provide our data to banks so that they can make lending decisions, mortgages, credit card loans, personal loans for consumers. In this case, I provide products and services to consumers directly. That's about 50% of the revenue of my business. And think about things like getting your credit report or credit monitoring or ID theft protection. Those are the kinds of products I provide. And then the other 50% of my revenue comes from partnership relationships. So think about Credit Karma, for example. They're a big partner of ours. So when you go to Credit Karma, you see the wheel where you see your credit score. We provide the data that allows them to do that. Okay. So that's what business does. You want me to share a little bit more about it?
Yeah, well, let me kind of push you in some directions here. So because I do teach strategic management, so I am curious here, how do you balance the short-term operational challenges and the longer-term strategic growth types of initiatives? How do you think about that?
So when I first start a new role like this, the first thing I like to do is just get a sense of where the business is. And excuse me, I've got a little throat thing.
Go right ahead.
So understand where the business is and kind of what some of the key issues are. But I also like to step back and create a vision and strategy. In this case, our purpose around this business is helping consumers live their financial best. And we needed to create a roadmap and a strategy for where we were going to take this business. Our goal was, we're about a $350 million business today in terms of revenue. I'd like to be $500 million by 2025. Okay. So we set a stake in the ground there and decided these are the new products, the new channels, the new markets, the new capabilities we were going to need to get the business from here to there in a handful of years. Then I have to assess what are the, where are the smoldering fires? What are some key issues? For us, we had 2 real short-term things. One is the entire company has been in the midst of a technology transformation. A couple of years ago, we decided to spend about $1.5 billion taking the company from our legacy tech stack into the cloud, so Google Cloud. And that's a huge deal for a company that's 120 years old. Many companies actually don't try to do that. We decided to. So
Okay.
my business unit is almost complete with our tech transformation. So we are, if you're a football fan, we're on the 10-yard line trying to get into the end zone.
Okay.
So that's what we're focused on. The second thing is I also run operations for consumers. So I have about 2,000 folks in contact centers around the globe, and our servicing needs a refresh. So we're working on that. That's another short-term fix.
Okay. So, in the title of your business, it's got global in it, right? So, what is the geographic scope of and reach of the business, and how do you think about that?
That's a great question. So today we service the Global Consumer Solutions business services the US, Canada, and the UK.
Hmm.
We have a sister business down in Australia, which essentially was an acquisition that Australia did about 10 years ago. So they've got a consumer business as well. And you heard me mention this tech transformation. So in about 4 months, all of the consumer businesses will be on one global platform
Hmm.
where we can then serve up products and innovate and share best practices instantly because of our global technology. So essentially, I'll be able to serve the world.
Okay. Wonderful. Now, I still want to go down this path a bit. So, how do you think about decision making for your organization, right? So, we have two extremes, very top down, what Bev says, when you say jump, they say how high. And then at the other extreme, we have bottom up, empowering your people to make decisions and being part of the process. How do you think about that? How do you approach that?
It's interesting. I believe in a model called situational leadership. And so I'm not going to give you a great answer to your question because I think it depends on the situation.
Okay.
It depends on the sense of urgency. It depends on the level of clarity needed. It depends on whether the team has the will and the skill to make the right decisions.
Okay.
So I look at every situation and then try to pivot and manage my own decision making and leadership style to address that issue at hand. So let me give you a really good example
Yeah.
because the team and I were on a call this morning talking about our project roadmap. And this is sort of how we commit to what we're going to do this year, what tech projects we're working on, how the team's going to spend their time. Now, quite frankly, I thought we'd made this decision in October. And the fact that we're still talking about it means something's gone awry. So I've
Right.
given the team enough time to sort of bring me back a recommendation. And today the decision was, we're going to do this, this, and this. So I call that situational leadership. I gave them the opportunity, let them sort of spin and churn on it. Now it's time to land because the CFO is saying, are you going to spend this money or am I going to take it away? So that means I got to make some decisions.
Okay.
That's a little bit how I think
You
about
had
it.
to give them a little shove, okay?
Exactly. Yeah, just a nudge.
Right, right. Okay. Now, so why don't you give us a sense for a day in the life of Bev Anderson? Now, and the reason why I'm asking this question is because when I asked you to do this, you responded to me at 4:15, not PM, but AM, okay? And so I'm wondering, is that a typical day in the life of Bev Anderson?
It's a really good question. And you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to, but is anybody on this Zoom, carrying around an extra few pounds that I call the pandemic, Yeah. So so I get up between 3:30 and 4 because I go to the gym at about 5:30. And some days that's a physical gym and some days that's virtual. I've got a trainer that I work with.
Okay.
I try to get into the office between 7 and 8, depending upon the day. And then we are off to the races from about 8:30 to 6, almost back to back to back. And this notion of the video, the accessibility of all of us via video is
Yes.
overwhelming and a little bit fatiguing. So it's one video to the next. a quick break to grab a bite and come right back down and sit down. And so that's my day at work. And it's business meetings, it's decision making, it's deep dives. Our CEO isn't traveling, so he spends a lot of time. He spends a lot of time with us, kind of, checking out what we're working on. So we've got
Yeah.
extra meetings there. And then I am the co-president of the Harvard Business School African American Alumni. So because of all the things that happened in 2020 around racial equity and all the work and programs that the school wanted to do,
Hmm.
I then go to my second job, which is leading the organization from about 6 or 7 in the evening until 9 o'clock, when I have to try to wind it down because I got to get up at 3:30 or 4 o'clock the next day.
Right.
So that's kind of what the days look like, and then I do a little bit more alumni work or regular work over the weekend.
Okay. Well, you just dropped the mic for a lot of us.
I do get an opportunity to hang out though from time to time and see friends and relatives in Atlanta. And
Okay.
so I
Yes. Yes. So you're not always on Zoom. Okay.
not always on Zoom.
Okay. We were getting worried there. We were getting worried. Now it's so you mentioned you touched on some of the events of last year, sort of in the last 12 months, issues on racial equity, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. How has your leadership evolved over this last year? Right? Lots of yeah, you know what? I'll just let you take it from there.
Yeah, let me start, if you don't mind, by explaining how all of that showed up for us here at Equifax and some of the steps we've taken. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I feel like I've had to sort of evolve and pivot my leadership style. I can literally remember the day it happened, and then
Mm,
how as a leadership team we came together and decided to write a letter of solidarity to our employees, and particularly being here in Atlanta, which is such a diverse, rich population, we wanted to make sure that
mm,
our team members heard our voice and saw our support for um, racial justice.
mhm,
And we very quickly realized, because our team members spoke, that that wasn't enough.
mm,
So our CEO and I got together and decided we were going to host the first ever global town hall on race,
mm,
global conversation about race. And this was a very, very big deal for Equifax, a 120-year-old Southern company
mm.
on its own journey around diversity, quite frankly.
Yes.
And so a few weeks after that, we did a video global town hall. It was probably, and as people have said, the most moving
Mm,
um, moment in the company's history,
mm,
because the dialogue was so real and so open. And we didn't necessarily do Q&A, but we actually let team members share their stories.
okay.
So people needed a
Mm,
place for their voices to be heard.
okay.
And so that was amazing. And then very quickly from that, we did a couple of other things. We did not have a Black employee network or resource group.
Hmm.
We were in the process of standing one up. So we stood one up. I and my colleague, who is the chief IT officer, we are the executive sponsors. And our organization is called Bold Black Organization Leading Diversity and Differences. So that's exciting. We rolled out unconscious bias training. We've opened up a whole dialogue around race and differences as a company. And it's been fantastic. So I've really enjoyed that. And then I think as it relates to the pandemic and just the craziness that 2020 was, and how do you work differently, we've
Hmm.
obviously had to adopt the technology like video, like this. And I realized how important it was. If you can't, I'm in my office, so you can't go down the hall and stick your head in somebody's office anymore.
Right.
How important it was to create these real connections using technology. So I do so many more one-on-ones, not only with my direct team, but skip levels. I get groups together for chats. We do business reviews more often. It's just a way to stay connected. And then for us, the first thing we had to do was keep our employees safe. We had 2,000 call center agents in the US, Costa Rica, Manila, India, that we had to get home so that they could keep
Wow.
talking and addressing consumers' needs. And so we had to get 2,000 people home in 3-week period of time, answer the calls, get the technology in a place where we could secure the data so that they could work in their bedrooms. I mean, it was massive.
Yeah.
And then when we started to come back into the office, because we are back, we're about 25% back, we had to create the protocols and the procedures to keep people safe in the office. So we've had a lot going on, but it really has been around connections, protecting people, keeping them safe, and then keeping connections so that people stay engaged and productive.
Okay. So let me conclude this segment with one final question. As Bev is president. What do you love about being the president of the GCS organization? What energizes you about being in this role?
It's such a great and important role. And I have been in financial services for a long time. And what I really wanted to do was start to pivot to making true impact. And my understanding about credit and how access to credit truly can change people's lives and help people build wealth and give them a path forward so that they can live their financial best. That was important to me. So when this job came along, it just felt like it was right in the heart of my passion.
Hmm.
The second thing is there's so much opportunity. As I said, this is sort of a B2B company.
Right.
But our brand really relies on whether or not people feel like we're helping consumers, have better access to their data, to their credit. And this business is in the marketplace in the US in particular, very small relative to other businesses like ours. So we've got tons of opportunity to grow. And I love growing and transforming businesses. So like every day I wake up and I'm like, okay, what are we going to go do today? So I'm very excited about that. And then the third thing is like the diversity of my team is unbelievable. I've got data scientists and analysts, product managers and marketers, call center agents and technologists. And so my ability to get to help lead and guide and direct and develop people of all walks of life and careers and who bring different skills to the table, that's super exciting as well. And then, we're kind of the 10% part of the business, and the 90% part are all these great big B2B, businesses. And we actually know we're going to give the other part of the company a run for their money. And I'm looking forward to doing that. So I'm a little bit competitive.
Okay. Okay. No, that's good. That's all good. That's all
Yeah.
good.
That's
Okay,
all.
let me transition us now to my next segment, which is just about your journey. Uh, because one of the questions from our students, from the business students of color, is they're curious about your journey. So perhaps why don't we start with you attending Florida A&M University, FAMU, which is a historically Black college.
Absolutely.
And that has been in the news lately. The profile with our Vice President Kamala Harris also attending an HBCU. How do you believe that your experience, your time at an HBCU helped prepare you for where you are today?
I tell people that it was one of the pivotal moments in my life. And I'll tell this story really quickly. I can get long-winded, so just, cut me off. I grew up in Kentucky, all set to go to University of Kentucky, had my dorm, had my books, we were weeks away. And I got this letter in the mail from FAMU, School of Business and Industry, and it said, "Dear Superstar." And that was all she wrote. I badgered my parents day and night to take me to Florida so I could see the school. And it just described this wonderful program that was so amazing. And it was for people who were like me, kids like me. And so we got in the car and drove 12 hours from Kentucky to Florida and literally walked the campus with the dean. And she described her vision. She'd gone to Wharton, and she wanted to create a school patterned after Wharton, but for undergrad kids from all over the country to build the next set of leaders. And I just fell in love with the program. It was a wonderful 4 years. There was a professional development part of the curriculum. So we learned how to go to business forums and ask CEOs questions. We had a little program that was patterned after Meet the Press. You know, in our senior years, we became kind of CEO leaders of certain aspects of our professional development programs. We had internships and you know, by the time you finished, because the school had such an incredible reputation, we had job offers that were really, really excellent. So I say that that program, you know, changed my life. And while I was there, I had a commercial banking class taught by Professor Larry Frieder, who was one of my most favorite professors of all time. And it was like a fish in water. I thought, oh my God, I was built for banking. I've been in
I'm not sure many people wake up and say that, but hey, you know, more power to you.
And I've been in some form and aspect of financial services since then. So
Yeah.
it's been great. It was a
Okay.
great experience.
So, you know, so you eventually attend Harvard Business School, you know, one of those little schools along the Charles River there.
Yes.
So I'm curious, what were your career aspirations as you were, you know, completing your time there? You know, how are you viewing the future, right? Because we have a number of our graduate students on the call here, and they're looking at job opportunities and kind of the unknown, the broad unknown. So what were you thinking?
Congratulations to every student here pursuing their graduate degrees. You know, it was the other pivotal moment in my life. I had worked for 10 years. So I was actually an older student at HBS.
Hmm.
I loved banking, wasn't ready to leave. Quite frankly, had a little bit of a confidence issue around, you know, will I get into one of those really fancy schools?
Mhm.
And so finally got talked into applying from some friends of mine who'd gone to FAMU and other places and who had gone on to get their MBAs. I loved my MBA experience. I will tell you that I didn't go in with a very clear set of, okay, I'm going to go get my MBA and then I'm going to go to Wall Street and then I'm going to go do this and I'm going to be CEO by the time I'm 45. Obviously, I didn't do that. But I will tell you that what I learned about myself as a leader, how I think and process information and data, the connective tissue that exists across strategy, business outcomes, financial outcomes, people, culture, like all of that interconnectivity, that ecosystem that we call business, that was so exciting to me to sort of get revealed. You know, until then, I'd been living slices of that as I worked, you know, from day to day and year to year. But sitting in a business school environment and having all of those pieces come together, all I knew was I wanted to leave school. I actually did want to stay in financial services,
Okay.
but because of my marketing and some of our customer behavior classes, service excellence classes, I realized that I wanted to move from the B2B space to the B2C space. I wanted to go down a consumer path, and I've
Okay.
loved it ever since. So I just knew that I wanted to find a way to build upon what I learned in business school. I knew I wanted to head down a more general management path because I could tell that I liked leading versus going to Wall Street, going to an investment bank and doing models all day,
Yeah.
or being a consultant, you know, and giving people advice. I wanted to do, but I wanted to do it kind of at a leadership level.
Okay. So after HBS, you spent a number of years at American Express and VP roles, and you were an EVP at Wells Fargo, and then now you're president at Equifax. I guess the pattern that I'm seeing is that in order to get to the next level, you had to, you know, sort of jump ship. So what kind of advice can you give our students out here about sort of managing those types of transitions and trying to make vertical moves, whether to leave or stay? What would you say?
Yeah, let me spend a minute on this because it probably whether to stay or go will be one of those important decisions that you make as you navigate your career. And I will tell you, I am in awe of people who I experience who get to a company and can work their way up. That is phenomenal. That is an excellent path. And it takes a couple of things. It takes seeing a path and seeing how you navigate it. It takes sponsorship and making sure that someone's got you as you navigate your career and advocates for you to get those stretch assignments or to get those promotions. It takes perseverance because sometimes the career goes laterally, not always up. Sometimes
Right.
flat out stalls, right? And so I'm always in awe. Ken Chenault, right, who's one of my idols, and for a period of time at Amex, one of my leaders, worked his way through his career at Amex, and I wanted to do the same. Amex was one of the best companies I have ever worked for, and I think I built my leadership chops, my notion of followership, my ability to develop the next set of leaders all at Amex. So that was great. I think for me, being an African-American woman, particularly, 10, 15 years ago versus now, it was hard. It was really, really hard to find that path. People love the work, you got new assignments, but that middle part of organizations were really stuck
Yeah.
on how to get someone who looked like me above it to the next level. And so the way that I found to get to that next level was to make a jump, make a transition. I always did it with a couple of things in mind. The first was, I'm not just jumping for the next job. What are the next 2 or 3 roles?
Okay.
That's always something to ask yourself. If you're going to leave one company, don't just go to the next company for the next job. What's the next couple of things? Look for the path there. The second is, who's supporting not only me, but the work I'm being asked to do. One day we could talk all about Wells Fargo, and there were plenty of things to talk about. But one of the things that became really challenging there was we were building a credit card business in the last largest bank that didn't have a big business on credit card. But the leadership there didn't totally know how to support that. And so, for 8 years, I pushed a big rock up a hill. We made some incredible progress, but at the end of the day, I had to say, it may be time for me to go do something else. So I, look for clarity of purpose of the role, support of the role and of you as a candidate, and a couple of ways that you can find paths up and into that organization.
So as you look back, as you pointed back to 10 to 15 years ago, it was a much tougher environment. How much of that was just for women in general, or, being a person of color in general? As you looked around, how was it faring for other people in those types of categories?
Look, I think it was tough. I think it still is tough.
Yeah.
Being Black in corporate America takes stamina, takes perseverance. It takes, we talk about the assimilation, the code switching, the wearing multiple hats. It's all real and it's exhausting. And so you truly have to look for environments where you feel like there is an opportunity to not only survive, but to thrive. And it certainly gets, I'm the president, I report to a CEO. So it definitely is in some ways easier for me today than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
But I will tell you, I still sit around the table and don't see very many people who look like me. I still know that my voice shows up sometimes differently in that setting than others. I still have to push a little bit harder to make sure people heard the point I just made. Right? And I think you have to figure out how to navigate those. One of the things that I think that came out of last year is the notion of courageous conversations and being willing to have those more openly
Okay.
across our differences,
Hmm.
because everybody gets an opportunity to learn if they're willing.
Hmm.
So I'll pause there.
Great. Okay. One of the questions from our students was, what has been one of the most difficult, the most, or one of the most difficult challenges that you faced on your journey? You're kind of touching on some things, but as you look back, what would you like to share as far as difficult challenges?
I this notion of leading while Black is certainly a theme. And I had a particular situation with a boss many years ago where we just couldn't get on the same page.
Hmm.
And all the way to, and the young ladies on the Zoom will recognize what I'm about to say, all the way down to I changed my appearance.
Hmm.
I changed my hair, I changed the way I dress, I changed every single thing
Hmm.
that I thought I needed to do to be more acceptable to this particular boss. And he was older, had different, of a different generation, had a little bit of a different way of thinking about what talent looked like. And the company really tried to make it work. We had couples counseling, so we had a coach that counseled the both of us on how we were going to work, because I
Kind of
was
like marriage counseling or
yeah,
something.
it really was. And at the end of the day, and literally after week upon week of, like, on Sunday nights being curled up in a ball, just anxious about having to go to work the next day, I
Wow.
realized it wasn't me. It wasn't me, right? And I know what I do is good work. I know how to lead my teams. I do
Hmm.
have followership. And so we decided, the company decided to kind of extract me out of that situation and put me in one that was much better. But I guess I would just say surviving that, taking the learnings, and then being okay moving on,
Okay.
right? With my confidence and my capabilities intact.
So what I hear you saying is you're going to have some tough skin out there, right? I
Yeah.
mean, companies are trying to, have more diversity and inclusion. And I know we got a question in the chat and we'll get to it. Companies are trying to do the right thing, but still they aren't there yet. And in the process, you're going to have some tough skin. That's what I think I hear you saying here. Okay, so another question from our students. Looking back at your journey, what do you wish you would have known when you started out? Let's say if you were to go back in a time machine to when you were at HBS there, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
I think the arc of a person's career is dependent upon the risks you're willing to take.
Hmm.
And, I'm the last year of the baby boomers. So our parents taught us, get a job, be stable, work your way up, don't rock the boat.
Right.
And I look at today's young leaders, and I'm overwhelmed by your sense of self and purpose and confidence. And yeah, you just don't take much stuff. That is so exciting to
That's one way to put it.
exactly. It's so exciting to see. So I think, one thing I learned as I maneuvered was maybe a little bit more risk taking earlier on would have been fine.
Okay.
At a minimum, I would have learned something, or, and at a maximum, maybe the risk would have really, really paid off.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to die, right? I wasn't going to fail. And, but just kind of pushing on, some of those career aspirations earlier on, and trying some things.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move us into our next segment, which I'm calling Reflect and Advise. So we have a number of questions from our students. This is, how to navigate kind of the racial things, identity, corporate America, financial services, that kind of thing. So, if I'm a graduate student and I'm about to, get my job, I'm coming in as the entry level newbie, I'm a person of color from a tough background. how can I navigate an environment where I am glaringly unique, right? Maybe, if I'm a woman of color, I'm going into a male dominated upper class kind of white environment, right? How do I navigate that?
I think I tell everybody the first thing you have to do is be proficient and capable in the work that you've been asked to do.
Hmm.
There is nothing that speaks louder than delivering the results and the expectations that people have thrust upon you in that particular role. So do your job first is really, really important, and do it really well. And understand that yes, most likely you're gonna have to be better. It's just the way it is. And we all wish it weren't so, but it is so. And so be better and be proud of being excellent. Um, the second thing I think is to teach and inform. And again, what I'm most excited about that transpired after all of last year's um, important events
Mhm.
is that people are open to listening and learning. And so feel comfortable
Hmm.
and recognize the power of your ability to inform and to teach, not preach,
Hmm.
but teach. And I think that's super important. The third thing is to lean into your uniqueness
Hmm.
because it is a source of power. There is excitement in the industry because Equifax, has a leader who looks like me at a time when we're talking about financial inclusion
Hmm.
for people who don't have access.
Mhm. Mhm.
So lean into the power that your differences creates for yourself. And that's whether you're Black, whether you're female, whether you have, other opportunities. Just make sure that you understand that you have unique and special gifts that have been given to you, and then you can share them with the world.
Well said. That's actually something we talk about in our strategy course when we talk about firms and creating competitive advantage. You don't want to just simply try and imitate what's going on around you. You want to carve out some unique strategic position. You want to be unique and different. That's great. That is strategic.
That's right.
So at the individual level, we can also embrace that as part of our competitive advantage in adding value in the environments that we go into. Okay, so I have another question from our students here. What are your thoughts? And you touched on it a bit. What are your thoughts on code switching or assimilating to fit the work environment? To what extent should you just kind of blend in versus, hey, I'm going to stand out and be myself? Or how do you navigate that?
I think as I've gotten older, and sitting in different seats, I feel more comfortable, bringing all of myself to work,
Hmm.
and being who I am uniquely, with my colleagues and outside of work at home.
Yeah.
Um, there is always going to be, certainly for the foreseeable future, there are perceptions that we have to navigate, particularly if you're people of color. So I'm a passionate, energized, massively switched on human being. And sometimes that shows up really scary to people. Me scary? How is that possible? But it shows up that way. And I have to
Okay.
I have to own that, right? So sometimes I take a deep breath and I dial down the passion and I try to find other ways to express whatever it is, whatever the emotion is that I'm trying to let my team see. If I'm really frustrated that something still isn't done, I have to, find a way to say that doesn't say she's the angry Black woman. So, so I guess I'm just trying to keep it real and tell people those perceptions still exist. For brothers, for Black males, let me say this, you get that like, whoa, he's going to push up on me, or he's going to be, difficult, or he's lazy or whatever, right? You get those perceptions, they still exist. And so
Mhm.
you do have to take the moment to navigate around those. It is not enough to say, well, you know what, I just don't care. They're just gonna have to deal with it. No, not really. You do have to care. And so again, you show up with your work, you show up in the way you build relationships, the way you lead teams, the way you ask for new assignments, so that people get an opportunity to see who you are in all of your glory. And that's the way to navigate. And then over time, you bring more of who you are to being. And I think that's the way you manage it. It's not simple. I
Yeah.
wish I had a formula.
We want simple answers, Bev.
I know, I wish.
But I think it's really important what you brought up there about bringing your whole self. That that's what we want from our students. Regardless of whether they're international or whatever background they're coming from, we want them to bring their whole self, their real self, into the classroom, and that's what we also want in our businesses. And at times it does become challenging. Hey, can I really be myself in this place? So
And it's what's interesting about it is the data shows when people are allowed to bring all of their diversity, all of their experiences into the workplace, it makes for a more successful firm. It makes for a richer educational environment, right?
mhm.
And so I think we all just have to keep walking that journey together. And when and there are moments where having those courageous conversations are important. I think we all want to be in cultures that allow us to thrive and flourish. And if you're in a culture that doesn't, finding the right way to have a discussion that says, let me tell you how this lands on me, or how this impacts my ability to show up and bring my best work to the table.
Mhm.
And can we talk about how we might, adjust or assess this differently or deal with this differently? Like those are the courageous conversations that I think we are able to have. And then I would say, if you're in any environment that doesn't allow for that,
Mm.
and that is in violation of your cultures, of your culture, of the way in which you want to be treated, you've got to reassess the environment.
Mm. Excellent, excellent. All right, I have another question from our students here. Being an African American woman, most people focus on the negatives and how hard it is to be an African American woman in the business world. While I agree with this statement, what are some ways women of color can stand out and leverage their ethnicity, identity in corporate America? So sort of along this path we've been talking about, but how would you respond to that?
I believe, and I think about my mom, I think about your mom. I believe African American women, Black women, are some of the strongest, most powerful women on the planet. We've changed elections. We've driven communities. There's data that show if you help a Black woman, it will help an entire community. And so the nurturing, the strength, the power, the perseverance, the ability to bring folks together, all of those are, I think, inherent capabilities of Black women. And so when you invite a Black woman into a work group, an educational environment, a work environment, a political challenge, you get value. And I think every Black woman ought to know that about themselves and ought to celebrate that and ought to share it with the world, because I'm a believer. I think that's the value I give to others. And I believe that's the value that we all have just innately in who we are. So
Hey, that's a second drop the mic moment here. that is great. Uh, and see, we have another question here. What is your biggest advice for students of color pursuing a career in financial services? Right. So you've been in that industry for a while, and perhaps there haven't been as many people of color in financial services. So, what would be your advice, for our students who want to embark in that sector?
Well, you can tell I'm a fan. I love financial services. Some of the best learning. So I started out on the commercial side or the B2B side. So we were lending money to companies. Your ability to learn how companies work,
Mm,
how business units make money, how they lose money,
mm,
how culture matters in the ability for companies to be successful, and how leadership matters in the ability to navigate both good times and tough times. You can see all of that by being in a role in financial services. And so I felt so prepared. I did that before business school. And then when I got to business school and we had the case method, Phil, do you guys do case method there?
oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So we have a case method. Like there wasn't a case I opened where I was lost. Like I could
Okay.
see, I could understand. So it is such a great learning ground. And then on the consumer side, like it's e-commerce, it's product, it's marketing, it's service. It's every single aspect of consumerism that you'd ever want to be a part of.
Hmm,
So it's super exciting, and it's in such a transformative state.
hmm,
Um, on the consumer side, all the fintechs are out, trying to outdo banks because they've got better technology, they've got better models, they've got better data, not as much data, but the way it's organized is better. And they feel like they can get to market in much better ways. And then the capital markets have kind of upended what happens in lending. So now you've got venture capital and PE firms, and just the whole space is just undergoing such transformation. It's such an amazing
hmm.
learning ground, and the careers are exciting and excellent. You can go down kind of traditional bank paths, you can go down Wall Street, you can go down the PE firms. A lot of my friends are going to work at PE firms,
Hmm.
fintechs, so many ways to play.
Awesome. My last question before we get to our open Q&A is microaggressions. How do you address them? How do you cope with them, deal with them? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because we feel them, we know them. I think where my own journey has gone, from just getting angry, I think was to understand intent.
Hmm,
Um, and in this global town hall that my CEO and I did on race, I talked about giving people space and grace.
hmm.
And that's asking a lot of us sometimes, right, to take that higher road.
Yeah.
But when you give people space and grace, it actually opens up the opportunity for that courageous conversation, because you do actually want people to know, when those microaggressions occur. Sometimes people are not poorly intended. Sometimes they are just not knowledgeable. They're just ignorant of this is a microaggression. And so sometimes you have to build a bridge so that you can educate and inform. But I do believe it's important to have the discussion. It's so uncomfortable on all sides. It's so uncomfortable.
Right.
But it's the only way people are going to learn and move forward. So we can turn our back and call that person a racist and never speak to them again and all of that, but that doesn't help anything.
Hmm,
Acknowledging it and saying, I'd like to share, how that made me feel and what it means when you say that, and have someone, they'll be uncomfortable, right? They're going to go,
right.
oh my gosh, but they're going to learn, and you're going to have a dialogue, and that's going to be super meaningful.
Hmm. Well, there's a lot of room for space and grace right now. We need a lot more of that in our world, in our country right now. Well, now let's transition to the open Q&A. So we have a couple of questions in the chat box. Let me encourage those of you out there in the audience, please submit some more questions. Bev was very excited that we're going to do live Q&A. So let's see, our first question from Lynn, how is Equifax able to measure effectiveness of its diversity and inclusion efforts?
Thank you for the question, Lynn. We're trying to do a few things. One is around hiring. And so the way we're measuring at the moment is the diverse slates, making sure that we've got diversity kind of within the hiring pipeline. And then, the percentage of people that we actually hire that meet our diversity criteria. The second is around talent management and, how do we navigate making sure we're pulling diverse talent through the organization? Is that happening at the same rate as our non-diverse talent? And we're looking at that by level, by business unit, by tenure, so we're slicing and dicing this data in all kinds of ways. And I will tell you, this is, the data, exercise, we're really just stepping into, and, everybody's engaged and excited to learn more and then therefore to make adjustments. I think just the amount of conversations we're having, so events and, webinars and people engaged in opportunities. And, we've had great conversations around allyship. And so the number of people who've been, raising their hands saying, I want to learn more, I want to be involved, I want to be on this journey. We're measuring kind of the level of engagement across the company and seeing some really, really positive results. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing.
All right, our next question from Shelley Watkins. Can you explain the difference between racial equity and racial equality in theory and in practice?
Oh boy. Great question. So let me take racial equity. So in my mind, there's an opportunity for us to make sure that systems, processes, policies remove barriers for people who are different. And I think that's equity. Level the playing field, create an equal opportunity for all. Racial equality is making sure that where we know that there are gaps, where we know that there are issues, we step up and we address those and we fix those so that we create, equality for all. And so I think these are, I hear people trying to pull them apart and talk about them separately. I think they are parts of the same ecosystem. You want your systems and processes and everything about, we talk about systemic racism. We've got to get rid of that. But where we know we've got issues and gaps, like in our hiring policies, in pay policies, in, how people ascend in organizations, we've got to create more equality there as well.
All right, I'm going to move around with some of these questions here, just looking at our time. This one's from Amal, my strategy professor colleague. You mentioned your organization is undergoing a major technology transition. Do you have any thoughts on best practices for making sure that technologies are implemented in ways to support fairness and inclusion? For example, making sure that the AI algorithms are trained without bias.
What a question, and an important question. I think as people begin to lean even more heavily into AI and machine learning, big data and the models that come out of them, we have to figure out where the inherent biases exist and what we're going to go do about them. And I certainly don't have an answer or solution, but I do believe that the next wave of all of this technology and data management will be around how do we dig in and figure out how to suss out where the challenges are, and then how to go do something about them. And, look, I believe in things like financial inclusion. We'll all have to continue to work to make sure that from the source data all the way through to decisions made by lenders, we keep poking and looking for inherent biases and figure out how to pull those out of the system, out of the data, out of the models, so that we can make better decisions and invite, everyone in to things like access to credit. So yes, I think there's opportunity for a lot of really good work there.
Here's one from Monty Simmons. He's interested in learning about what tactics you might use to convince people who might discredit your accomplishments or your business because you are, from a minority community and background.
Facts, facts, facts. So this one is a big thing for me. Your data is your friend. The moment somebody tries to discredit you, your ability to say, last year when we grew the business by 20%, in the face of X kind of competition, it really helped open up, the profitability of the firm. We grew margins 3 basis points. I mean, like, whatever the data is your friend, because nobody can refute the facts. And I have learned, and this is a skill that over time, because I thought, well, gee, what I said was just really awesome. Why didn't anybody pick that up? Or why didn't I get that yes decision I needed for more funding? And when I realized that, bringing your A game around your data and your results, and your knowledge of, core facts about what you have done to drive, progress and success, that gets people to listen. And I think we just all have to build that muscle a lot better. And that's an important part of your narrative and your story. Everybody should have a story. What's your story? I grow and transform businesses. I doubled the business of the credit card business at Wells Fargo in 8 years. I wanted to do it in 4. It took 8, but okay. And here I'm going to grow this business to $500 million, right? So it's those kinds of things, and create your story, wrap it around, facts and data, and then sell it.
All right, so I'm going to close us out with this. There's one last question I want you to address, and then I'll let you have some final thoughts on sort of what you see as the benefits of Black History Month. But my last question comes from Pat Sweeney. How do you assess inclusion?
I think about inclusion in its broadest sense. So certainly and I don't know if you guys have seen something called the diversity wheel. It exists sort of in corporate America. But there are things that you can see. So race, gender, age, sometimes, disabilities or not. And then there are things that you can't see. The way I think, my background and experiences, which which shape the way I make decisions or shape how I assess outcomes. The culture, and how culture sort of lends itself to who I am and how I am. And so to me, inclusivity is all the things, both seen and unseen, that make us who we are, and that make us who we uniquely are. And all of that uniqueness coming together creates just powerful ways to drive businesses, to solve problems, to, address communities, to enhance the world. And I like thinking about inclusion in its broadest, biggest, sense, because I think that's the way, as a people, we're going to move forward.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour. I want to respect your time.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure having you here with us, Bev, in celebration of Black History Month. And as I said, I want to give you just some final closing thoughts on just what you believe what you see as just some of the benefits of Black History Month, why that's so important to you.
Well, first of all, everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. The questions were amazing. I think we could have talked for another hour. Um, and Philip, thank you so much for having me here.
No
Black
problem.
History Month is one of the most important times because it gives us an opportunity to take a moment and reflect on a people who have had enormous, unbelievable impact on a society. I always tell people, do you know that slaves built the White House? Like, I just want people to hear and understand that. And the richness, the dynamism, the perseverance of a Black culture to lead music and sciences and financial services. Frederick Douglass started a bank. All of these sectors of our society have had rich impact from Black America. And so I just think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to take a moment and to reflect on the shoulders upon which we stand and recognize that we are now shoulders upon which others will stand so that we can propel them forward too. So thank you all for the time. I love the opportunity to share my thoughts and stories and look forward to hearing about all of your successes. Philip, thank you.
All right, Bev, thank you very much.
All
That
right, everyone, have a great day.